Chapter 1. The Raichand Kapoor wedding was supposed to be the event of the year, a spectacle of power, wealth, and prestige. The Raichands, one of India's most influential business families, and the Kapoors, a political dynasty, were sealing an empire with this marriage. The ballroom of the St. Regis Mumbai gleamed with golden chandeliers. Fresh orchids imported from Thailand cascaded from the mandip, and the scent of sandalwood incense mixed with the crisp chill of air conditioning. Journalists, socialites, and industrial tycoons sat in eager anticipation, waiting for the moment when Rudra Raichand and Ishani Kapoor would be pronounced husband and wife. But Ishani Kapoor had vanished. Not a single soul had seen her for over 2 hours. The whispers began slowly, weaving through the crowd like a slow-burning fire, before erupting into a full-blown scandal. Mahendra Kapoor, Ishani's father, had turned an unnatural shade of red, barking at his assistants to find his daughter immediately. Her mother was sobbing silently, clenching her pearl-studded dupatta as she rocked back and forth in her seat. And in the center of it all stood Rudra Raichand. Silent, cold, seething. His broad shoulders were rigid beneath his ivory sherwani, his obsidian eyes darker than the night sky. The sharp cut of his jaw was tense, his lips pressed into a line so tight it looked like it would shatter. He did not move, did not react. He simply stood there, absorbing every whisper, every rumor, every hushed conversation about how the mighty Raichands had been humiliated. Aadhira Varma felt her stomach twist. She had been standing off to the side, blending into the shadows like always. The forgotten sister. The quiet one. The one who handled family legal disputes while Ishani shined in the limelight. But even she could not ignore the storm brewing before her. Mahendra Kapoor turned to her suddenly, his eyes desperate. Aadhira, beta, do something. Aadhira's breath caught. What do you mean? His gaze flickered to the press waiting outside, their cameras already flashing, their questions hanging on the tip of their tongues. You have to fix this. Her heart hammered against her ribs. How am I supposed to? Marry him. The words crashed into her like a tidal wave. She blinked, convinced she had misheard him. Marry Rudra? No, the voice that spoke wasn't hers. It was Rudra's. A shiver ran down her spine as he turned his head ever so slightly, his piercing gaze landing on her for the first time that evening. It was the first time Rudra Raichand had ever truly looked at her. And God help her. It felt like the ground beneath her feet had just crumbled. His eyes, dark as midnight, held her captive. No, his voice was quiet but dangerous. I am not marrying her. Something in her chest twisted, but she forced herself to ignore it. Mahendra swallowed. Rudra, please. You think I am some desperate fool who will just pick another woman because my bride ran away? Rudra's voice was razor-sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. Aadhira flinched. The humiliation burned deep. Of course he wouldn't want her. She wasn't Ishani. She wasn't the Kapoor princess, the glamorous socialite, the woman worthy of Rudra Raichand's attention. She was just Aadhira Varma, the unwanted stepdaughter. She took a step back, ignoring the tightness in her throat. It's fine, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. I don't want this either. Rudra's gaze snapped to hers. A strange silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. For the first time that evening, something flickered in his dark eyes. Something cold, assessing, calculating. He tilted his head, studying her. Then he stepped forward. The movement was slow, deliberate, like a lion circling its prey. And suddenly, the distance between them felt suffocatingly small. Aadhira held her ground, refusing to shrink under his gaze. If he thought he could intimidate her, he was sorely mistaken. Rudra exhaled, his breath warm against her temple as he leaned down slightly. Tell me, Aadhira. His voice was deceptively calm. Are you prepared to ruin your family's reputation? Her heart stuttered. What? She whispered. His lips barely moved, but his words were a promise of war. Because if I walk away from this mandip, you and your entire family will be destroyed. Her breath caught. That's not fair. He smirked. Fair? This is not a game of fairness, Aadhira. This is survival. Her hands curled into fists. You wouldn't I? He leaned in, his voice low, dangerously seductive. You know what will happen the second I walk out that door, don't you? Her throat dried. She did. The media would crucify the Kapoor family. Stocks would plummet. Investors would withdraw. Their carefully crafted empire would come crumbling down. Her mother's future. Her father's business. Ishani's entire legacy. Gone. Aadhira felt something inside her snap. She hated him. Hated the way he was always in control. Hated the way he thought he could manipulate her. And yet deep down, in the darkest part of her heart, she knew one thing. He wasn't wrong. Taking a slow breath, she lifted her chin, matching his intensity. Fine, she whispered. I'll marry you. Something flickered in his gaze. Before she could process what was happening, his fingers wrapped around her wrist, tugging her forward. A gasp left her lips as she stumbled into his chest. His hold was firm, unrelenting. You better not regret this, Aadhira. His voice was a warning. Because once you belong to me, there's no turning back. Her pulse pounded. The air around them crackled. Aadhira lifted her eyes to his, ignoring the way her skin burned under his touch. I don't belong to you, Rudra, she whispered. Not now. Not ever. The corner of his mouth tilted upward in a smirk, but his grip on her tightened. We'll see about that, he murmured. And then, before she could take back her decision, Rudra Raichand dragged her to the mandip. The wedding that wasn't supposed to happen had just begun.